Thank you. I also want to point out that we have sitting over here Nava Hefetz, our educational director, who does wonderful work for us in the educational field, and perhaps she might be tempted to answer some of the questions also later on. We are, this evening, Erev Yom HaZikaron, our Israeli Day of Remembrance. We're also here in the period of Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, also a time of semi-mourning, but not only, because the time of the Omer is a time that we count the days from leaving Egypt, which we celebrated on Passover, to Matan Torah, till the time that we receive the tablets at Mount Sinai. And what we're here to talk about tonight is Torah. And we're here to talk about what it is that we as Jews believe and stand for, what we as rabbis swore to uphold when we were ordained. Now, of course, we're also told Shivim Panim LaTorah, there are 70 facets to the Torah. There are even those who say that at Mount Sinai, each and every person heard something a little different. And so, when we talk about upholding Torah, different people see that in different ways. But the Torah that I learned growing up in Erie, Pennsylvania, was a Torah that said a basic part of what it means to be a Jew is to be concerned with universal human rights and social justice. This is what I learned from my family, from my teachers, from my rabbis, from the community. And I think that's something that I imagine a lot of you here, those of you who are from the Jewish community, can identify with. I think it's a piece of what our ethos is as North American Jews. In fact, one of the most interesting findings of the most recent North American Jewish population survey, I'm sure many of you know, is that of all the different possible measures of Jewish identity, that aspect which with more Jews in North America identify with than anything else, which give more Jews in North America pride in their Judaism than anything else, is the connection between Judaism and social justice. And so I think we can have our quibbles and quabbles about the right balance between universalism and particularism. We have people that talk the talk without walking the walk. And of course, once we start talking about Israel, as we will tonight, then everybody's buttons get pushed. But whether you're talking about Erie, Pennsylvania, or Brooklyn, New York, I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find many people in the North American Jewish community who would dispute the proposition that these are core Jewish values. And so when I first spent some significant amount of time in Israel, my first greatest shock, and I'm dating myself a bit here, was to find out that bagels were not readily available. What kind of Jewish state is this without bagels? No problem anymore. But the second greatest shock was to find out that many people in the Israeli community did not necessarily see these values of justice and human rights as axiomatic in the same way that I had learned, particularly in the religious community. You know that Israel is a very lively democracy. We had some 27 parties in the last election, each of them getting state-funded television time. There is a wide and full opportunity for people to express opinions, and many Israelis share many of the values and ideas that I'm going to speak about tonight. Most of them tend to be secular, whereas in the religious community, for a variety of historical and sociological reasons, and this was not always the case, but increasingly people have been socialized into a somewhat volatile mixture of extreme nationalism and particularism. One of our rabbis, his daughter went to B'nai Akiva, one of the Orthodox youth movements, and she met her husband-to-be when there was a vaguely liberal speaker, and they were the only two people that clapped their hands at the end. And that's how they met each other. So that in Rabbis for Human Rights, if our first mandate is to address and redress human rights abuses, then our second and no less important mandate is to introduce into people's intellectual universe, not only in the religious community, but also in the secular community, where many people assume that this nationalistic, particularistic brand of Judaism is the sole authentic brand of Judaism, because that's what they see reflected by the people who for them are the authentic representatives of religious Judaism, to introduce into people's intellectual universe that alongside this dominant understanding of Torah, there is an equally Jewish, equally textually based, humanistic, equally authentic humanistic understanding of Torah. One of my clearest memories from my first year working for Rabbis for Human Rights back in '95, it was in December, just a month after Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. And we went for a morning of study at a yeshiva in the occupied territories by the name of Birkat Yosef. Birkat Yosef is headed by a rabbi who had been quoted on the radio as saying that bombs should be placed on the side of the road to prevent withdrawals from territory. And he's one of the rabbis who was suspected, and I really underline the word suspected. I don't know how many journalists and lawyers we have here, but suspected. It was never proven, and he denies it. But had been suspected of being one of the rabbis who had given a halachic, a Jewish legal backing for the assassination. And so we spent the morning studying with the students, and then we had a round table with the students and ourselves and Rabbi Rabinovich. And one of the first things that he needed to say was just what seems so basic to all of us. What is it that we learn in the very first verses of Genesis, of Sefer Breshit? That all human beings are created b'tselem Elohim, in God's image, and that therefore Judaism cannot and must not condone the oppression or humiliation or mistreatment of any human being. But then we started talking about details, and then we got into trouble. So we were talking about some things going on in the Hebron area at the time of oppression of Palestinians by settlers or by soldiers. And Rabbi Rabinovich was saying, you haven't seen it yourselves. Unfortunately, we had. You're getting it from second and third hand sources, etc., etc. And then one of Rabbi Rabinovich's own students stood up. And he said, of a kvod alav, but Rabbi, when I was doing my army service in Hebron, I saw it with my own eyes.